There is a single word ordinary drivers say to police on the side of a UK road every single day. And it sounds so small, so polite, so harmless that they never realize it was the exact moment they handed the whole encounter away. That word is yes. Not shouted, not aggressive, just a quiet, cooperative, nervous yes. And by the time the boot is open, the seats are being lifted, and a hand is going through the glove box, it is far too late to take that word back. This is the mistake I want to pull apart tonight, because it is not made by criminals. It is made by decent, law-abiding people who genuinely have nothing to hide and who believe, honestly believe, that saying yes proves their innocence. It does not. In the specific world of a roadside stop, saying yes to a search before you understand what is actually being asked can be one of the most legally expensive syllables you ever speak. And here's the part almost nobody explains to you. On a UK roadside, there are two completely different conversations happening at the same time, and officers are not always in a rush to make it clear which one you are in. One conversation is a request. The other is a power. They can sound almost identical when they come out of the officer's mouth, especially when the blue lights are still flashing and your heart rate is somewhere north of comfortable. But legally, they are miles apart. One, you can refuse. The other, you cannot. And if you cannot tell the difference in real time, you will consent to things you never had to consent to, and you will give away protections the law was quietly holding open for you. I've watched this pattern repeat itself so many times that I can almost predict the sentence a driver is about to say before they say it. The window comes down, the officer is calm, friendly, maybe even a bit chatty. And somewhere within the first 90 seconds comes a line that sounds like this. Do you mind if I have a quick look in the car? Anything in there I should know about? Happy for me to just check the boot. And the driver, wanting this to be over, wanting to seem reasonable, wanting to prove they are not the sort of person who causes trouble, says yes. Sure, go ahead, no problem. That yes has just done something the driver did not intend. It has quietly converted what might otherwise have been a request with no legal footing into a consensual search that the driver themselves authorized. And once you have authorized it, you cannot easily complain about it later. You cannot say the officer had no grounds because grounds were not needed. You gave permission. The law treats that permission as the power. That is the trap. It is not shouted at you, it is invited out of you. Now here is the legal line, and I want you to hear this clearly because the whole encounter turns on it. In England and Wales, police can stop a vehicle, and separately, they can search a vehicle where a relevant legal power applies. Under Section 1 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, an officer generally needs reasonable grounds to suspect they will find stolen or prohibited items before they search a person or a vehicle, including things in or on that vehicle. Reasonable grounds is not a feeling. It is not a hunch. It is not, you seem a bit nervous, mate. It has to be based on something specific and objective enough that another officer, hearing it later, would recognize it as a proper basis for a search. That is the standard the law sets. And when officers rely on that power, there are things they should normally tell you, remembered by the mnemonic, go wisely. Grounds, object of the search, warrant card if not in uniform, identity of the officer, station, entitlement to a copy of the record, legal power being used, and your right to a copy of the record. That is the framework. That is what the encounter is supposed to look like when a real power is being used. But here is where people really get caught. If the officer does not have those grounds, or does not want to commit to a specific power on the record, there is a much easier route open to them. Ask you. Just ask. Because if you say yes, none of that framework has to be triggered. No grounds needed. No mnemonic needed. No record of a Section 1 search. You have opened the door yourself, and the law will treat you as having walked them through it. That is why the single most important question you can ask on a UK roadside before you agree to anything is this. Before I answer that, am I being searched under a legal power, and what grounds are you relying on? Say it calmly, say it once, do not shout it, do not smirk, do not deliver it like you have been waiting all week to say it. Just ask. Because that one sentence forces the encounter to declare itself. It makes the officer choose. Either they are relying on a specific legal power, in which case they should be willing to name it and give you the grounds, or they were asking you for consent, in which case you now know that yes and no are both genuinely available to you. And the follow-up sentence, the one that keeps you protected without tipping you into obstruction, is this. I am not consenting, but I will not obstruct. 9 words. Learn them. Because those 9 words do something very specific. They refuse the invitation without resisting the power. If the officer has a lawful basis to search, they can proceed, and you have not physically stopped them, which means you have not committed an offense by getting in the way. But if they did not have a lawful basis and were fishing for consent, you have just closed that door politely and firmly, and the encounter has to find another route or end. Now, I want to talk about what is really going on underneath these stops, because if you do not see the mechanism, you will keep falling into it. When an officer starts a search-adjacent conversation with softeners, do you mind? Is it all right? Happy for me to? Any objection to? That is not accidental phrasing. That is the language of consent. It is designed to sound casual because casual answers are easier to get. Nobody wants to be the person who kicks up a fuss over a polite question. That is the psychology being used. Your instinct to be agreeable is the tool. Your fear of looking guilty is the lever. Your desire to get home is the pressure. And your yes is the outcome they are steering towards. And this is where most people blur two completely different things. They think being cooperative and consenting to a search are the same behavior. They are not. You can be entirely cooperative. You can provide your driving documents. You can confirm your name and address where you are required to. You can stay calm, keep your hands visible, speak respectfully, and not make any of it harder than it needs to be. None of that requires you to consent to a search of the car, the boot, the glove box, or anything inside it. Cooperation is one thing. Surrendering a legal protection is a completely different thing. Officers, and I mean this without hostility, are not always going to draw that line for you. That is your job. That is why you are watching this. Let me make the trap even more concrete, because this is where the damage really happens. Imagine you have got something in the car that you had genuinely forgotten about. A prescription that belongs to someone else. An old penknife from a camping trip last summer. A friend's bag they left in the back seat 2 weeks ago that you have never actually opened. You have committed no crime by any stretch. But the moment you say yes to a search, whatever is found in that car is now in play. And you have handed it over voluntarily. You cannot later argue there were no grounds. You cannot argue the search was unlawful. You gave permission. That is the whole ballgame. A single nervous yes offered in the first 2 minutes of a stop can create a problem that did not exist 10 seconds earlier. That is the sort of sentence people only understand fully once they have been on the wrong end of it. And this is the part where the encounter stops being about the law and starts being about your nerves. Officers know, and they know it well, that most people talk far too much when they are anxious. So the second trap after consent is chatter. Where have you been tonight? Where are you heading? Whose car is this? What is in the bag on the back seat? Any reason you slowed down when you saw us? These questions sound like small talk. They are not small talk. They are building blocks. Every answer gives the officer more material to either escalate the encounter or find the grounds that were not there when they first walked up to the window. The single most underrated legal skill on a UK roadside is the ability to be polite and quiet at the same time. You do not have to be rude. You do not have to lecture the officer on pace. You do not have to film your own face while shouting, "Am I being detained?" In fact, all of that usually makes things worse, not better. What you need is a small handful of calm sentences and the discipline to use them. Here are the documents you have asked for. I would rather not get into where I have been. Before I answer that, am I being searched under a legal power, and what grounds are you relying on? I am not consenting, but I will not obstruct. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? That is the entire vocabulary. That is the whole toolkit. Everything else you say is optional. And on a roadside, optional usually means risky. Now, an important exception, because I am not here to sell you a fantasy. There are situations on UK roads where officers do not need consent and where refusing will not stop the search. If they have reasonable grounds under Section 1, they can search the vehicle. There are separate powers in other legislation, including certain drug-related powers, weapons-related powers, and specific authorizations in defined areas where the threshold is different again. If a lawful power is being properly used, your refusal to consent does not block it, and physically resisting will land you in serious trouble very quickly. That is why the phrase is, I am not consenting, but I will not obstruct. It draws the legal line without stepping over it. It preserves any later challenge you might want to make because you have not authorized what happened, but it does not give the officer a fresh offense to arrest you for on top of everything else. And this is where I want to say something a lot of these videos will not. Do not treat every officer like an enemy. Most of them are doing a job that is harder than it looks, and most stops end without any drama at all. The problem is not that every officer is trying to trick you. The problem is that when things do go wrong on a roadside, they go wrong fast, and the people who suffer most are the ones who never learn the difference between a request and a power until it was already too late. You are not preparing for hostility. You are preparing for the small percentage of encounters where one wrong sentence quietly reshapes your evening, your record, or your case. There is also something worth saying about tone, because tone is doing more work in these encounters than most people realize. You can say every correct sentence in the world and still make the situation worse if you deliver it like a challenge. The people who walk away clean from these stops are almost never the loudest ones. They are the ones who sound almost bored. Calm eyes, steady voice, hands visible, short sentences, no sighs, no sarcasm, no sudden hand movements towards the glove box. The words are only half of it. The other half is that you sound like someone who is not rattled, because rattled people volunteer information, and volunteered information is how routine stops become something much more serious. Let me compress the whole thing down, because if you remember nothing else from this, I want you to remember this shape. Cooperate with what the law actually requires. Provide the documents you must provide. Stay calm and stay quiet on everything else. Never say yes to a search until you have asked whether there is a legal power and what the grounds are. If there is a lawful power, do not physically obstruct it. If there is not, refuse consent clearly and without argument. And do not talk your way through the encounter trying to sound helpful. Because helpful on a roadside almost always means volunteering something you were not required to give. The reason this matters so much is that the damage in these situations is almost always done in the first 3 or 4 minutes, before most people even understand that a legal moment has started. By the time you are watching the officer's torchlight sweep the back seat, the important decisions have already been made. They were made when you rolled the window down. They were made when the first friendly question was asked. They were made when you said yes without knowing you had a choice. The law in England and Wales still gives you real protections in this moment, but those protections only work if you do not give them away yourself. And the easiest way to give them away is a polite yes, offered too fast, too early, and too eager to please. So the next time you see those blue lights in your rearview mirror and you feel that jolt in your stomach and your brain starts scrambling for the right thing to say, I want one sentence sitting at the front of your mind before anything else. Before I answer that, am I being searched under a legal power, and what grounds are you relying on? That sentence is not rude, it is not obstruction, it is not anti-police. It is the sentence that makes the law show its cards before you show yours. And once you have said it, the rest of the encounter becomes a great deal simpler to survive. If this made one legal line clearer for you tonight, keep the phrase, keep your calm, and keep the difference between cooperation and consent locked in somewhere you can reach it under pressure. Send it to the person in your life who talks too much when they are nervous, because that is the person this will one day protect. And if you want the next breakdown, the one on what happens the moment an officer asks to see your phone at the roadside, in the exact words that stop a casual look from becoming a full search, subscribe, because the middle of the encounter is the worst possible time to be hearing any of this for the first time.